Tales, the podcast where we create fantastical worlds with help from you, our listeners. My name is Rob Hilferty, and I'm here with my co-hosts Daniel Quinn and Chris Prunty. We're just going to dive right into this fucking episode because, man, we are interviewing game designer, author, writer, all that nonsense, Rob Schwalb. We're going to cut to that now. And welcome. We are joined today by game designer, author, writer, Rob Schwalb. Rob, so glad to have you with us today.
Hey, thanks so much for having me. I'm glad to be here.
Yeah, absolutely. And for those of you, for people who might not know you too well, why don't you go ahead and tell us a little bit about yourself?
I'll just work from current to backwards. I am the publisher of Shadow of the Demon Lord, Punk Apocalyptic, the role-playing game, and the forthcoming Shadow of the Weird Wizard. Before that, I worked on Dungeons & Dragons for a number of years. Contributions include the Player's Handbook, Dungeon Master's Guide, Monster Manual's Guide, Zolo's Guide to Everything, and all the other stuff that's come out for 5th edition D&D. Before that, I was a heavy contributor to 4th edition and 3rd edition. Before that, I worked for Green Ronin Publishing as a line developer for Song of Ice and Fire role-playing. I designed a Black Company campaign setting, Thieves World. I ran the line Warhammer Fantasy Roleplay 2nd edition. And then before that, I was working freelance, and you can find credits if you go this far back from in books by Fantasy Flight Games, AEG, Paradigm Concepts, Goodman Games, etc. So I've been doing this for about 18 years. So yeah, I've been busy.
Yeah, and obviously that's a really impressive resume. And one thing that I wanted to start off with, because I feel like it's a bit lesser known, but as I was doing my research for this interview, because we do that here, I noticed that you wrote for the role-playing game Grimm. And I was wondering if you want to talk about that a little bit, because I think Grimm is one of those like great, interesting settings and conceits for a game. I wanted to see what your experience was like on that game.
It's a funny game and not really a funny story, but it's an interesting story because, and I'll tell you why it's awesome. I was sucking dick in alleys basically in the early days of my career, and that means not literally sucking dicks in alleys, but it's going to Origins with a stack of shittily made business cards and glad handing everybody and anybody who would throw me a bone. I had already landed 2 or 3 gigs, but nothing had come out yet, and it was all pretty difficult. And so Origins was tough. I went to Gen Con after that and didn't have much more luck. But my later to be friend Rob Vaughn contacted me by email and said, "Hey, I like what you did on Unholy Warrior's Handbook," which was a really tremendously bad book I did for Green Ronin, but it was early days. And I like what you did in that book. Would you like to take over on the Grimm role-playing game? It's for our Horizons imprint. And Fantasy Flight was at this time was pretty cunning for the early days of the D20 boom, because they pushed the game engine in ways that I don't think anybody expected. So we had a Transformer style game under the Horizon imprint. There was also a Mad Max game, and so on. Now the premise for Grimm, and the writer who had started the work, he just basically had a bare bones skeleton and some general ideas about character archetypes. But the premise is you play kids who get sucked into this twisted version of Grimm's fairy tales. And keep in mind, this is 2002, 2003. So it hasn't already been done to death by television and film by just, dredging up old stories and repaving them. This was pretty new ground at that point. There wasn't a whole lot of stuff that had been done. I mean, there was the inversion of the Beowulf story, I guess, the Grendel book, and I'm sure there were a bunch of other things about Riding Hood and so on. But anyway, so I'm going into this, and a lot of that book probably wouldn't hold up by today's standards, because there were things that you could get away with, or you not even necessarily think you were getting away with anything, but stuff that might be offensive by modern consumers' standards. Anywho, I wrapped it up, and that was all in that kind of build up towards my work, towards me getting hired by the Ronins. And that was a cat running around. Sorry about that. the Ronin's hiring me to be the line developer. It comes out and does really, really fucking well. Like well enough that it won my first Emmy award, and I lost. I got the silver for product of the year, losing only to Monty Cook's Arcana Evolved, no, Arcana Unearthed product. This just goes to show you how fucking ancient history this is. But, so it was a neat experience. Fantasy Flight later came back to me and said, "Hey, we'd like you to do the introduction to the standalone role playing game." They custom built a story. They think they softened some of the things that were going in. I mean, I did the opening, and I did a section on the beanstalk. I can't remember if that survived or not. I was going really dark at one point. Georgie Porgy, he liked the little kid who liked to eat candy. I had decided that this character's teeth had all rotted out and replaced them with broken glass, and his appetite had evolved to go after people who had high sugar in their blood. So he would chew on them instead. So it got really dark, and I don't think they really appreciated the darkness that I was going for. But the first one was almost family friendly, and we had great times. So there's that story. Happy.
I'm noticing that you went dark immediately and for the rest of your career. So I feel like that's actually, you're on brand. You stayed on brand. You had an identity and you kind of stuck with it. I feel like that's pretty damn smart, all things considered.
So that's an existential question for you. Like, why dark fantasy? Why did it come down to that in the end?
Well, I think it goes back to how I always ran games. I would always go for shock and disgust and just regular vanilla D&D. And this goes all the way back to the beginning of my career because I was fascinated by the grotesque and the disturbing. I wasn't much of a horror buff, but I grew up in an extremely conservative religious household. And so I lived in fear of even touching my penis when I peed, thinking that if I did any more than that, it would land me in hell. And, when my mom says, you can't play Dungeons and Dragons because Satan's crawling into your butthole and laying eggs because you're thinking about dragons and goblins and getting gold pieces and shit. It became like I had to go along with it. So that, of course, opened the door to darker and more horrifying games. But whatever. The point is that even when we were playing Twilight 2000, I would go dark. So when I got started, I pitched books that were kind of edgy, not edgy, but on the darker side of the spectrum. So like the Unholy Warrior's Handbook. I pitched that as the Anti-Paladin's Handbook to the Ronins. Then they hired me to work on a big chunk of Book of Fiends, which I recently, I guess a year or so ago, did the 5th edition update to that book. And that's where the Ronins called me, or they would prefer me to call it the Ronins, called me Dr. Evil because pretty much everything I touched went full on gross, full on weird, full on disturbing. And that just seems to be the thing that, and even Wizards of the Coast recognized that. I worked on the Book of Vile Darkness for 4th edition. I did Elder Evils and Exemplars of Evil 3rd edition. So, yeah.
This is basically the Satanic Panic's fault. This is why. Yeah,
it's pretty much me saying, fuck you, people. Fuck you for ruining what was a lot of fun for me and my 36 level fighter who had a tamed gold dragon and was in the middle of slaughtering everything in the deities and demigods. Fuck you for interrupting that awesome story.
Yeah. So I imagine that your soundtrack to childhood was interspersed between like church hymns and then like probably I'm guessing either some kind of Norwegian black metal or like just fucking like hardcore punk movement from the 80s. That's my guess.
I was an innocent child. I didn't smoke my first cigarette until I was 16. I didn't drink my first alcoholic beverage, aside from my dad coming to me in the middle of the night, like a beer tooth fairy, coming in and filling up a small little glass of beer so I would sleep well. I guess I always think of fatherhood and it's warm and fuzzy. That's why I drink all the time. Anywho, the thing about it is that I was like the hardest thing I listened to was this Christian metal band called Petra that my stepmother gave me. And it wasn't until I saw David Gilmour play on Saturday Night Live in support of, I guess, the About Face album, that I realized there was a whole world of other things out there. So by the time I was a senior in high school, I was into Morbid Angel and Cannibal Corpse and everything else, and I've never turned back. So full on Hail Satan when it comes to the music side.
Oh, fuck yeah, absolutely. We interviewed the Morkborg guys not too long ago, so we're on that Hail Satan train with you. Absolutely.
Yeah, I need to get together with those guys so we could just just talk about dark shit together.
That would be
cool.
Yeah,
look, if we could facilitate that in any way, I'd love to try and do that.
Watch on the side? That would be great.
I think my favorite thing out of the Morkborg game was one of the background elements that your mom was pregnant when she was hanged, and when her neck broke, she shat you out.
Yes. I am 90% sure that's a Berserk reference, but I'm not. I didn't ask them.
It's so fucking cool, and so it just tells. Yeah, it's everything. It's right in the 10. It's like, I get a can of tuna fish and I open it up and oh shit, it's tuna inside. I was wanting chicken. No, you open up Morkborg. It says right in the 10. You're gonna go fucking crazy and feel bad about yourself playing this game. Fuck yeah.
Also, you're going to desecrate at least 3 holy sites in the meantime.
Oh yeah, we had a good time playing it. It was fun.
Oh fuck yeah! Spiked flail to the face is probably the best bit of like writing I've heard for that, and goddamn is it fucking accurate too.
Yeah, it's good. It inspired me to ratchet up my game a bit. I was getting too complacent by having grandmas with stone babies on umbilical cords and using flails.
Absolutely. And that's the thing. Every now and again, you'll find a book or like something where you look at it and you're like, fuck, I need to do better. Like I've been fucking phoning it in with this bullshit. And now I've actually got to do better now.
Yeah, that was kind of my impression of when I finally got my hands on the last edition of Cult. It's like, fuck. Come on. Come on. I mean, I couldn't play this game with anybody. I live in fucking Tennessee, of all places. Can you imagine me shopping around at the elementary school? It's like, hey, kid, you want a Happy Meal and play a game of Cult? That's never going to fly.
I get you quickly.
How do you feel about Satan, exactly? Yeah.
I told you about my Lord and Savior. Yeah.
Since it's not a license that you own, I'm not sure if it'll be on there, but on the Rob's Basement, does that mean we'll be seeing Morkborg or anything like that on there, or Punk Apocalyptic?
Yeah, we're gonna do more stuff. Here's the fucking bullshit. So as the world kind of imploded and all of the shit started falling apart, I haven't had anybody in my basement except for the occasional lizard that sneaks in through the back door, or a runaway cat from upstairs. So my basement has been pretty much devoid of anything except my own ennui and grief. So we haven't recorded anything. And we've done some gaming online, but I fucking hate that shit. So we tried to do Mass and Nyarlathotep, and it went fine for a little bit, but then I just get drunker and drunker, and it didn't doing me any favors. So we're just kind of easing back into it. It's kind of like going on a sex sabbatical for 7 years, and you try to actually get back at it. It's going to be painful. So that's kind of where we are right now. So there will be, when we get, assuming that, the year doesn't end with a titanic belch and fart followed by sudden and spontaneous defecation, and which translates into a complete and total collapse of our nation state into a third world fucking nightmarish hellscape. If that doesn't happen, and the pandemic does wind its shit back because some cocksucker out there decides to finally wear a mask and stop the spread, then maybe we'll get going again.
Oh my god, this is going to be the greatest episode we've published.
So I'm hearing from you. We'll hear back from Rob's Basement on 2024.
Well, yeah, at this rate, we'll see.
Very cathartic, though.
Oh yeah. There's just this fucking immense level of anger and grief towards the world, and fuck yeah, this is why
a righteous anger.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't blame him.
I'm sure it won't boil over or anything due to any events.
I mean, we're going to get really great source books though from this.
You certainly will. Yeah, my next role-playing game after Weird Wizards called The Trouble with White People. The game.
I have some an opportunity for you to give cantankerous advice if you would like.
Sure, of course.
Okay, so we usually try to ask each of our kind of the grizzled guys who've been there before and done the design work for newbie world builders. They're going out there, like, what's either your pet peeves if you want to rant about them, or your number one piece of advice when people are designing a new world.
All right, well, let's clarify that just a second. Are we talking about designing a new world for publication, or designing a new world to masturbate on with your friends?
For publication, because why the hell else?
No, fuck that. Anything.
All right. Well, if you're doing it for yourself and your friends because you're doing this as a hobby and you're not trying to monetize your hobby like a dumbass would, then not saying that people who try to monetize their hobby are dumbasses, but
sir, you were on a podcast about that very thing right now.
You'll fucking figure it out. You'll fucking figure it out when you're 15 years old and you're in a broken marriage and you're surrounded by cats and you haven't left the fucking house except to go to the bar and you're yelling at people randomly. And the last time somebody came to invite you to their church, you pulled your pants down. You're going to say, man, maybe I should have stuck with fucking McDonald's because at least I'm not this stressed out all the time and I had some place to go other than having to go and fucking do the work. But if you're going to do this for your friends, steal everything you fucking can. Steal everything. If it's not nailed down, take it and make it your own and make it fucking awesome because you're doing this as spank material. You could be doing all sorts of other things with your life and time than sitting around and tinkering with world design, but you've chosen to do this. So steal all the shit you can, jumble it up, and make it something sweet. And, if you're doing this professionally, you could do the same thing if you're 17 years old with rich parents. You might get a fucking movie deal out of it. But anyway, that aside, if you're doing, I think what my big pet peeve is for world building is like if you look at Demon Lord, the world building, there's a thick slab of cynicism in there, right? It's just cynical as fuck. Because I was looking at this shit and I'm like, oh God, I have to create yet another fucking fantasy world because it hasn't already been done again a million fucking times. So of course we're going to have a analog to the Grand Canyon. Why the fuck not? Every other one else does. We have to have some place called a reach, and we have to have some bureaucracy there. And there's probably going to be a place where there aren't any major kingdom things, but it's ruled by a bunch of bandit chiefs. That works too, because these are all recognizable archetypes that live in our overwrought fantasy genre. So I think it's fine to do that because
steal and pervert are the primary goals here.
Yeah, but
steal and pervert.
Think, it's you got to build toward what build your world to support the particular slice of the genre that you're going for.
Yeah, if you want to fit the theme and the mood and all that stuff, right?
Right.
Yeah.
Like if you're going to build a fantasy setting in some backwoods Arkansas nightmare place, then you might think about what, you might think about that education's going to be pretty shitty. People are going to have a hard time doing basic math, and then build your world around that. So I love you people. You're great.
So actually that kind of brings a natural segue into, you have a new product that you're developing right now, which is basically a toned down version of Shadow of the Demon Lord, right?
Yeah. How is that possible?
So that's actually my question. So a lot of what I love about Shadow of the Demon Lord, besides like the mechanical freedom and everything like that, is just how evocative a lot of the spells and like basically it's dripping with flavor. You have a fucking spell where people shit themselves to death. What is the toned down version of shitting yourself to death in this?
Well, I think you should probably expect that spell is absent. There's a spell Horrid Joining where you can basically you can become permanently attached to one of your best friends, and every time I do that, they're always going to be attached to the penis. It's just the way it works. So you're peeing out so the guy's peeing out your mouth, the little alien thing. Anyway, no, Weird Wizard. All right, so the whole idea for a family-friendly version of Demon Lord started like the year after Demon Lord came out, and so that should testify. That should tell you how fucking hard it's been for me to just dial it the fuck back, because I want to have big demons with spiked dicks running around, and I want to have crucified babies and the sky boiling and oceans turning to blood, the animals rising up and saying, "We've had enough, you fucking humans," and starting to, wholesale murder folks. I want all that shit, but I can't do that. So as I've been working with it, and I also noted, and there's also the other part of this problem too, is that Demon Lord's underlying math is fine-tuned for the horror fantasy experience, where Weird Wizard is not a horror fantasy experience. There's an expectation of survival that kind of comes with this package. Now, Weird Wizard is sort of dark fantasy, but dark in a way that you might say Space Mountain at Disney World is a little dark. It's, it's scary. You might poop a little bit when you go at the end. There's flashing lights, and there's probably a kid crying, and there's probably some guy getting a hand job, but you can't see any of it because it's all dark, and there's flashing lights, and it ends. And you think, oh, we're on fucking Space Mountain. Weird Wizard's similar in the sense that it's got some negative backstory stuff. There's an old country where it's all fallen into this just horrific war, and then before that, civilization had risen up and destroyed itself. So we know that this is like the third go at trying to unfuck ourselves as people, and we just probably can't do it again. So it's got some of that grimness, but you could play a fucking happy little dragon, and you're not looking around for treasure and murdering big scary monsters in the same manner that you would in like a D&D game, but you are doing some of those same kinds of things, right? You're trying to explore this new world and make peace with the people that live there, and maybe occasionally have to fight a big scary demon or something along those lines. The gameplay is really tight, slick. It looks good, and it has just as many fucking options in it as Demon Lord does.
There you go. Absolutely.
With a lot of your work coming from this kind of cynic place, how do you, and also the fact that you're your own writer, publisher, and all of that, setting your own deadlines, I was curious as to when you hit a creative dead end or writer's block or anything, how do you motivate yourself, but also be incredibly cynical?
There's two things, fear and self-loathing. I grappled with imposter syndrome in this business for a really long time, and I've had good about 4 or 5 years of therapy to help deal with that and a bunch of other things. So I've managed to kind of work through some of that damage. I also drink a lot, which is another problem that kind of feeds into this monster. So I don't have the luxury of creative dead ends. If I encounter a rough spot, then I have to fight through it. Typically, that means I will grab a journal and go to a bar, when the world's not on fire, and work out the problem. Or it's the same thing as whiteboarding in someplace else, but I just don't have the benefit of a whiteboard or a staff of overly bored people who'd rather be anywhere else. Instead, I have to work it out through my own. There have been times, I remember that I was working on this project called The Thieves' World Gazetteer for the Ronins again. And the writer that we hired to do this book just went colored way outside the lines. When you're working on a licensed property, you're kind of constrained by what is in the light, what's there in the thing that's been created. And unless you are like sharing a bed with the owner of the licensed property, you're probably not allowed to just make up whatever the fuck you want willy-nilly. I mean, can you imagine what George would have said if I decided in Song of Ice and Fire. Well, George, we're going to have this place called Candy Fuckland, and you get each piece of candy that your little knight character gets, just loads you up with hallucinogens, and it gives you like a dose of Viagra. George would probably freak out about that, even though tonally it probably fits. So with, I remember that I'm grappling with this manuscript. I'm talking with Lynn, and Lynn's giving me, is doing red lines, and she's basically rebuilding the larger world that surrounds Thieves World. And I just looking at this manuscript, and it's a 160-page book thereabouts, and I just got so upset, and I got so sick. I mean, I threw up twice. I had to lay on the bed, and it was full on panic attack. Couldn't get through it, but eventually I got through it, and the book got done, and that was that. So I am cynical about a lot of this industry, largely because that's another question. But I am cynical about the industry, but I do love the hobby still. It's just work, and my cats need to be fed, and I need to keep my lights on, and someone's going to pay my bar tab. So you just do the work.
I imagine that. Well, for context, Owen Casey Stevens has had a good old Twitter thread of the real RPG industry and just how fucked up and awful it can be.
Yeah.
And I imagine that you've probably tasted a little bit of that, especially when you're working with licensed properties and stuff like that.
Sure. And Owen and I have worked together. We're friends. We've known each other for years and years, and we've been in the trenches together. I think Owen's certainly has there's a particularly bitter pill for him, since that he got hired to work for Woods of the Coast, and then wasn't there very long before they laid him off. And then he got the job at Paizo and was doing pretty well there. And then his wife took a job, and so he left, and then she got laid off within the day after she got there. So it's just but this is it's not like tabletop RPG design is somehow different from any other industry. I mean, if you work for the video game business, you could sacrifice your life working 80 hours, 120-hour weeks for 6 months. Your work in the game's over, and they lay you off. I know people that have moved across the country and out of the country over and over and over again for as long as I've known them, without ever actually putting down roots in any place long enough to even call it home. I mean, I don't even know why you would ever unpack your boxes if you're working in that field.
Yeah,
so
Jesus.
It's pretty. Wow. It's not. That's which kind of brings me back to my sarcastic statement first. Is like, if you're going to try, I mean, there's a DIY part of this business, and that's what's so exciting about what's going on now. You know, Morkborg and the raft of other games that are like it are interesting and exciting and evocative, and they're taking the hobby in all sorts of new and interesting directions. But and I think that's exciting. There are other aspects of this hobby that just make me sad, because I don't need another book of feats, and I don't ever need to see the complete book of elves ever again, because we've already done this, right? I've written a description on elves more times than I can count. If I have to think about what make dwarves exciting and new, fuck, I don't know. I mean, read the fucking 100 source books on dwarves have already been done, right? I mean, and so I think my cynicism in this just comes from, there is some degree of retreading. We just redo the same thing over and over and over and over and over and over and over again to just feed that appetite.
It's really like you're trying to draw blood from a stone, when it's like that teat has been milked to the point of calcification. Yeah. There is nothing left. Do something new and interesting. But then you have like the bigger companies who are like, well, we're corporate and we need that book on elves by Thursday. So if you could really get back to work on that. I mean, I love the DIY aspect, right? Where you're seeing like, you know, one of my favorite things about the Morkborg interview was like, Johan was like, fuck it, write a book based on a cookbook. You know, like, fuck the rules, do whatever you want. You know, like, as long as it's good, it'll be good. Yeah. And I think seeing the direction of the industry go that way is like actually pretty fucking heartening. especially as the industry is getting as big as it is, and I feel like it's growing, bigger than it ever has been.
I think it is. I think it is, and I think I think it is, in some ways, right? I think that the ebook aspects or the digital aspects of the business have ballooned in ways that I just can't even begin to grapple with. I have no idea how many things are on drive-through right now. I don't even want to think about how many titles they have. But the Dead Tree version of things seems as though it's not the traditional model for publishing is dead.
Mm-hmm.
Let me say that. And I think board games are still doing really well, but board games are selling for reasons other than playability. People buy board games for the shiny toys they contain. They don't buy them because they think they're going to play them over and over again. Role-playing games have always had the struggle of trying to convince someone to play this role-playing game instead of Dungeons & Dragons. That's the problem.
Are you seeing stuff in the indie space that you're liking more than others? Because oftentimes we see Shadow as being in between OSR and modern games, and that it's indie, but it's also got these roots that are simple and lethal and all that. Are there any games that you're excited about that you're seeing lately?
No. I mean, I don't. Right now, pretty much, I spend my money and my attention on stuff that my friends are making. So Steve Darlington did Relics, and that's a really cool game. Cam Banks just dropped the Cortex System game handbook, which I just got in the mail. I'm also a big nerd for classic games like the Harn stuff. So I'm not actually answering your question by saying.
I mean, those are great.
Yeah.
That's 3 right there.
So I mean, I'm excited about that. I mean, I picked up I'm just looking at what the fuck I have on my desk. The Alien game, and I've got some Cthulhu, and I've got the Green Knight box game from A24. I've got just stuff like that. But I mean, I don't know. I haven't dug too deeply into that aspect of the game of the universe. My friend Chris Davis, he's the guy who runs Call of Cthulhu for our group.
Mm-hmm.
He sends me. He's the one I kind of use to scout out that shit and point me to the good stuff. I've never have noticed Mort Borg had it not been for Borg for him. I called it Mort Borg. I sound like I'm the Swedish Chef.
Mort Borg.
Entirely by design. Chris, you had a follow-up question. Go ahead.
Sorry. Yeah, my question was going to be, I've always seen either role-playing, D&D, or world creating as slightly therapeutic. I've seen people put themselves into characters, or you can kind of get something from a world that they're building in repeated themes and such. And I just want to say, what's going on with Hunger of the Void? Is everything all right?
I before I answer that question, I want to go back and completely agree with you about the world building as a cathartic exercise. I have vivid memories of being in not even 20, but I was living in my filthy apartment, and I being at a draft board in my kitchen with the floor had not been mopped in a year and a half, overflowing ashtrays, giant trash cans full of beer cans, joint probably tucked in a cheek or between two lips as I'm using a mechanical pencil to sketch out the lines of my continent and figuring out these giant world-shattering, shaking events and piecing together what would be the basis of a campaign that I ran for the next 10 years. That's exciting stuff, right? Mm-hmm. That stuff that I'm not at all cynical about. I'm a full believer in that, in the craftsmanship of design as a pursuit of, or rather, the production of art. You're making this thing for its own sake. So I don't want to convey anything other than mad respect for people who enjoy doing that. I know I kind of came off a little rough there before, but that's just basically my own negativity coming through. Hunger of the Void, really the cosmology, the Shadow of the Demon Lord cosmology is my own dissatisfaction with how gods, the divine, and religion are handled in the lion's share of fantasy role-playing games. I feel that for a lot of players, the god, serving a god, is just a cheap way for me to reskin my character as some avatar of that god. So yeah, I think that I think the whole idea of gods as actors in a game. Well, actually, we can really fuck with this for a second. Role-playing games are all about your character that you're playing and the characters other players are playing, working together to solve some sort of problem. That's the story. If you weren't trying to solve a problem, you're just jerking yourself off and playing wet toast. Whatever comes last has to eat the slice. Now, if you've got gods who are these magnificent agents in the world, and they have these specially chosen individuals that are going to go sing songs for them and do all sorts of wonderful things, I feel that it takes away something from the character. It means your character is enslaved to this divine being. There is some interesting tension between having a mercurial or even cruel or wicked deity who you're in service to, and then having to carry out that deity's missions or whatever. But I like it seems like you're shortchanging yourself if you've got some god that's going to take care of you. So the idea of when Demon Lord was that the gods are all just fucking fairies that people just deified because, I don't know, you run into an immortal in the woods, you're probably going to worship that thing because that immortal's scary and weird. Likewise, the appearance of the new god is an invention by the devil, which is a fallen fairy, to take away power from all the deified fairy folk, take power from them for himself. And why wouldn't you? And if you have this veneer of the savior type being who's going to spare you the fires of perdition, that seems to play in perfectly, because what happens is you get those fuckers who are worshiping you, and then who also don't have to make a moral decision because they're making those moral decisions out of fear of punishment and out of desire for reward rather than just doing the right thing. So you've got those fuckers who that are under your thumb, and then the people who reject that in this cosmology and who are doing terrible things, you're getting them too. So it's a double win. Now, beyond that is the idea of the Demon Lord itself. And so when I was working on that book, I said, well, we know what the gods are and aren't, right? But I want to play with this idea of a first cause, a prime mover, something along those lines that would be the creative force from which everything springs. And so that's where I started building this story about you have God with a capital G and an O with an umlaut because it's a metal game. So you've got God, and then God in his is unformed substance, but it's self-aware, and in its self-awareness, it wants to create companionship, another. And so, of course, it creates a demiurge. The demiurge is also an identical copy of God, but this demiurge also has its same creative impulse. And so by that same creative impulse then translates into a multitude of beings, which become the genies. And the genies and their need to create, they tear apart God and make reality from it. And so the dark secret of the game is that God just wants his shit back. And I think that's dark and delicious because it's hopeless. Because if you feel any sense of, I want you to feel some sympathy for this put upon entity, because obviously he was betrayed and then dismembered.
And he just wanted companionship to begin with.
So and now he's enraged and insane because he has been used against his will. And so he wants his stuff back, but in doing so, he destroys all the beauty and anything good that could also have come out of that. So that's what I think makes Demon Lord stand apart from, it does have a giant canyon, and it does have the patchwork lands where there are a bunch of warring little kingdoms. And there is something called the Witch King, and there are all those other things you'd expect. But I always like to twist it in some way to make it interesting and exciting, even though I'm using iconic elements that people recognize.
I think you
Right.
called it a no bullshit approach to role playing.
Yes, that's exactly right.
When your piety leads to the uncreation of everything, I think that's where the twist comes in, right? Yeah. Woo! All right. Well, we've got next up, we've actually got a question from our Patreon, CR Rowanson, who wants to know, where do you personally like to start when you're building a campaign or a one-shot?
When I'm building actually both cases, I enlist. I've started doing this recently where I don't build anything, and I enlist the aid of the players or the audience, whichever way you want to put it, to construct the setting together. So I will start with a town, for example, and then everyone will roll dice and we'll make up stuff. And the last time I did this, right before the world ended, once we had built the town by rolling a big pile of d6s, and I just said that if you roll a 1 to 3, it's a house. If you roll a 4, it's a government building. If it's a 5, it's a 5 or 6, an industry or / temple or whatever. Once we had done all that, we had a small whiteboard, and so I'm drawing all the stuff all over it. I had each player come up with a secret about this place, because the players were the ones who were telling me who the various people, interesting people were in the town. And so I'd get maybe 2 or 3 lines of notes for every major NPC that was in the community. And then at the very end of the process, everybody else wrote on a Post-it note one secret that nobody else knows except for them. And then I use those secrets to be fodder for the adventures. And so I'd use those secrets and spin out adventures around that. And by starting small in this way, the world kind of builds out organically. And for the kind of games that I run, where I can't imagine running a campaign lasting more than 3 months, it's great because you get player investment, and then also a lot of that work is taken off my shoulders. Because to be honest with you, if I'm going to come up with 50,000 words on a campaign setting, I better get paid for it.
I love that for session 0, like having the players come up with their own secrets and then incorporating it. Yeah.
I often feel like secrets are one of those things that are, and actually, before we even get into that, do you play open secrets or do you like to have actual secrets at the table?
Actual secrets.
Yes,
Nice.
absolutely.
Yeah, I like that.
Yeah, I like having everyone write their secrets, putting them in an envelope, and then shuffling the envelopes and giving them back to people.
Oh, that's a good idea too.
Oh, man.
Yeah, because now you have a secret and other people know. So
that's cool. Good idea.
Yeah. So now we're going to pivot into what are most people's favorite part, which is the world building jam. Rob, are you ready?
Oh yeah, I'm ready. I've got my genital cuff on and everything.
I can hear you're engorged from here, so that's perfect.
I did
Remember,
not.
I'm a grower, not a shower.
All right, so the official world building with us jam session, the way that this works is we roll the genre, the subject, and the theme to determine what kind of a scenario we're going to be building. The genres are between science fiction, fantasy, horror, modern day, romance, and superhero. And I'm going to bring my dice tray over and I'm going to roll for that now. So for our genre, we're going to be working with fantasy. All right. We're in the right oeuvre. As for the subject, we have our choices are an item, a monster, a place, a historical figure, an event, or a cataclysm. And for that, we're going to be working with a place. So for the theme, we can choose between tragedy, sacrifice, love, metamorphosis, pride and honor, madness and the unspeakable, triumph and hope, or treachery and revenge. So we're going to be working with sacrifice.
Oh.
All right. So Rob, you're the guest of honor. Our scenario is starting with a fantasy genre. It's based around a place, and the theme is sacrifice. What are you thinking of?
So I'm thinking of. All right. Well, I'm going to just give it to you to start. This is the first thing that came to mind. Something really big, something really, really dangerous, has been sleeping in this place for a long time.
Mm-hmm.
and it has to stay asleep because if it wakes up, shit happens. I'm not thinking the Tarrasque or any of that bullshit. I'm just thinking of something big and detrimental to its environment. And I imagine that the sacrifice would be something that would be used to keep it asleep.
Mm-hmm. All right. So
Or
we're
false
dealing with sacrifice, fantasy, a place. So the place is where the sacrifice takes place. Is that what you want to deal with?
Sure,
Okay.
Does it? You said it poisons the place that it's in as well.
it could. I'm completely open.
Mm-hmm.
I just keep thinking about like townsfolk that are crawling into its anus and having
Mm-hmm.
to inject it with something inside.
Ooh, do they like live? Like, is there like a civilization built in the place on it?
Yeah.
Okay.
Ooh.
So this is like a
Like
weird
in it.
parasitic relationship, right?
Yeah.
Where if this thing wakes up, then
They're all fucked.
there are basically colon cities that are destroyed when this thing awakes.
Like the
This-
sphincters close and everyone suffocates.
This is hitting oddly close to home.
No, is there like a warning if it's starting to wake up?
Well, I guess should we thinking about like why would anybody fucking live here?
Yeah.
What are they getting in return?
Very
They must
cheap
get
land.
something.
Cheap land.
I'm guessing that it could be something along the lines of there's religious reasons, right? Like you were so close to God that you were literally inside of them. Or I mean, you mentioned it yourself, right? Where if you saw something that was immortal or immensely powerful, you'd probably worship it, right? Especially
Right.
if you're some backwards fucking hick.
I
So-
bet there's a group among them that know what it actually is and are exploiting some resource it emits as well.
Sure. Maybe the dreams of this slumbering thing are that certain people, the priesthood, for example, either
Mhm.
truthfully or falsely, are able to hear these dreams and then get their religious guidance from it.
Oh, yeah. And that's why they can't get people to sleep, because if
Right.
it wakes up, they lose their powers.
So,
Right.
like, the divine magic is literal dream stuff.
Yeah.
Sure.
Mhm.
Ooh, can
And
they
what do we
travel to the... Sorry.
No, go ahead.
I was going to ask, like, can they travel to the being's, like, place through the dreams?
I was thinking more like this thing would be telling them to do ludicrous things, right?
Oh, okay.
But I mean, I think that it could also be a way that I'm totally open to the idea
Mhm.
of there be a dreamscape that exists only while it's asleep.
Ooh, freaky. Okay.
Maybe these things aren't even corporeal. Maybe the entire existence of civilization is based on the dreaming or is based
Oh.
on the thing dreaming. So these are like figments of its reality, but because we as conscious beings believe whatever and kind of accept whatever reality is, maybe when this thing wakes up, it blinks out of reality because all of reality is false to begin with.
So we're its dreams, you're saying. So if it wakes up, our existence ceases. That's why they've got to keep it sleeping.
And then maybe I think there should only be like a certain caste that understands this risk.
Okay.
Mm.
Yeah, I think that priest class or caste.
Arch preach.
What's different about the priests? Why do they get to know it and others don't?
Maybe they can control aspects of the reality because they understand that it's a dream.
Oh, they're lucid dreamers.
Mm-hmm.
And that's kind of like their version of magic in some way,
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
Oh, that's kind of cool, actually. I like that idea. All right. So what are they sacrificing in order to keep this thing asleep?
Someone to dream forever. They'll never wake again.
Oh. But they'd want that, right? Like you want to be, because that means you still exist.
No, well, we didn't say that it would be a willing sacrifice or an unwilling sacrifice, but you're giving up your existence and to continue on experiencing the real world.
Maybe the creature's lonely and it needs those people to be sacrificed to it to keep sleeping.
Or maybe the sacrifice isn't exactly as much of a sacrifice as we might think, right?
Maybe the sacrifice was the people we met along the way.
Oh, go fuck yourself.
What's Rob think? That's my question.
Yeah.
I'm wondering if. All right, so just to clarify, we've got the real thing is it's gigantic or not gigantic, but I'm assuming this is going to be scaled on human scales. So this is something that's big enough that you could be inside of it. and perhaps big enough that you could build an entire community inside of it. And that the priest class is aware of the their own existence depends on this creature's dreams.
Mm-hmm.
What if the priest class, however, are quasi-real, that they could have an existence beyond, but they lose all of their power, and everybody else, the common folk and anybody else, is going to be these are the true figments. The priest class are working towards becoming real themselves, and maybe what they're doing is stealing parts of the god in order to manufacture their bodies, or to ground them, to anchor them, or to give them persistence beyond. And that requires luring outsiders in, maybe.
Yeah, I like that.
Yeah, this is almost like they're creating their own tulpa in some way, right? Like they're manifesting a physical thing through dreams and spirituality, really.
Well, and there's like a parasitism to it that's like it's unwilling, at least from the creature, you know?
Right.
Mm-hmm. All right. So I like where we are right now. And now that we've gone this far, it's now time to roll the twist die, where we basically undo all of the hard work that we've just put in. So let's see what the twist is. Oh, someone is manipulating everything from behind the scenes, and it's not who you expect.
Oh. Well, it's not the priest then, because we know they're already manipulating stuff.
Right.
And it couldn't be the beast.
Oh, maybe Chris, say that again.
What
say
if it's
that
his
into
subconscious? I'm at the mic. What if it's his subconscious?
Oh.
So you could have because this thing's intellect is so vast and, complex, you have its own inner workings fighting against itself in some way.
Yeah, part of it wants to end its existence, or maybe wants to wake up, or has a purpose that is self-destructive or something, and, just let it out.
I like the idea that we have essentially a suicidal god. And it's not even necessarily that it wants to wake up, but rather it seeks oblivion in some way.
Yeah.
I mean, it's had a millennia of locked-in syndrome, so
Actually, yeah, maybe that's what it. Maybe that's the twist, is that it basically thinks that death is preferential to essentially being lived off of. Being the host to parasites.
I wonder what its understanding of the beings living on it is. Like, to what extent does it understand them, or what they're doing to it?
And does it understand them, or how? Yeah, that's a good point. It's a good question.
Those things are its nightmares.
I mean, imagine being semi-conscious and just acknowledging the fact that there are ants living inside of you. It's not super pleasant.
So, to Rob's point, maybe it has it has a sort of awareness of these other beings. Except for that, it's a negative awareness. It's like they're its dreams, essentially.
And that could cause some sort of phenomena, as when it's surfacing, there are earthquakes or other apocalyptic signs, which the priests then use to reinforce their control over the community.
Right.
Oh, yeah, that's really fucking cool. I think that's it. I feel like that's pretty much the scenario that we're dealing with here. All right. That was cool. Rob, thank you so much. And now we're going to roll into the rapid fire question portion. So, Rob, my wife wants to know, is cereal a soup?
Yes, it is.
All right. No. And can you tell me about your most memorable character death?
It wasn't my character, but it was a character played by the late Jeff Quinn. He was a gamer who played with us. He died a couple years ago from, it was bad. Anyway, Jeff was always an unwelcome guest in our gaming group. His brother, we loved. Jeff was always strange and off-putting. But he would play these characters, and he would cheat and do all these other things. But we entertained it, and it became the punchline for our jokes in the game, because his characters would die in spectacular and magnificent ways, week after week after week. As I was trying this passive aggressive way of just trying to reveal to him that maybe he should do something else with his time. That failed. The best death, though, he was playing, and one of the things about his as a player was that frustrated me so much. And I do love Jeff. I miss him terribly. But Jeff would always be the guy who wanted to scout ahead. And so we'd play these games, and at first couple times we did this, Jeff was just mapping out the whole dungeon by himself because he's rolling pretty all right, probably because he was cheating. And so he's seeing stuff, and then the rest of the players just kind of playing vicariously through him. So that would get him into trouble. So this particular death, he had advanced down a passageway, and I had planned this out in advance. That this was a double pit trap, one on the ceiling, one on the floor. And Jeff triggered the pit trap on the floor and fell to the bottom. And there, in the bottom of the pit trap, was a gelatinous cube. And he fell on the gelatinous cube and started bubbling quietly. The second trapdoor opened on the ceiling above, releasing yet a second gelatinous cube, which then was down on top. When the rest of the party finally caught up with this horrific end, they saw his bubbling remains inside. And I remember my friend Nathan, at an act of solidarity with Jeff, cast Produce Flame and dropped a little ball of fire on top. It was lovely.
He became a jelly sandwich.
Oh my God.
Daniel, hit him with the rapid fire questions. Go.
Your favorite drink to drink while gaming?
Amstel Light.
Amstel Light. Okay, that was quick. And of all monsters, what is your favorite D&D or fantasy monster?
The Gasta from, I think it's how you pronounce it, from Fiend Folio. It was a skeleton troop carrier that would throw up all the skeletons in a stew of corrosive juices.
Oh,
that's fucking dope.
That's quite disgusting.
That's cool.
All right. And Rob, what have you been playing recently?
Zombicide.
All right.
Chris,
what is that?
And Eldritch Horror.
Chris, what did you have for a question?
In theme for the month, what's your favorite horror movie? And is it Hereditary?
It is Hereditary.
Yeah.
Yeah, it is. Fuck yeah, it is. All right. And who is someone you would like to plug who is not yourself?
Cecil Howe. He's got the Forest Hymn and Picnic. It should be coming out really soon. He ran a Kickstarter for it, but it is a awesome game powered by Shadow of the Demon Lord's game system. You play sentient, talkative animals living in a weird forest, and it's got some dark edges to it, and it's really exciting. Everything's been hand painted. It's got songs in it that you can sing, including music for it. It's a really cool product.
Wow. And Rob, why don't you tell everyone where they can find you online and all your projects you got going on?
Right. So online, I'm on Discord. There's a Shadow of the Demon Lord group there. You can also usually get a hold of me on the Schwalb Entertainment page on Facebook. Also the Shadow of the Demon Lord cult on Facebook. I'm on Twitter as Schwalb_ent and also as @RJ Schwalb. My website is schwalbentertainment.com. My current projects are Not Drinking Myself to Death. Shadow of the Weird Wizard is in works right now. I've got another Poison Pages thing coming up called Hired Help, which tackles companion characters in an interesting way. I'll be working on a big ass adventure for the Nightfell setting for 5th edition that recently kickstarted. And I'm also putting out more products for Punk Apocalyptic, a wildly irreverent take on the post-apocalyptic concept. Let's see, what else do I got going on? Yeah, that's probably enough. Yeah, that's enough.
Look, there's no time limit. You can keep going if you want.
Well, then, if we're going to keep going, I've got a supplement called The Northern Reach, which explores that. I've got some more adventures and some more paths and other things along those lines coming out for Shadow of the Demon Lord.
You don't sleep, do you? No sleeping.
No. And then far future, we've got 2 new games coming out using the Demon Lord engine. One is called Abaddon, the Angel of the Void. That is a giant civilization that is floating through the void and is set by demons, but has a science fiction edge to it. So it's be fun. And then there is a modern game where you play a secret society magicians in a small town and fighting terrifying things that are there, stalking you and causing trouble. So those are the things I've got in the works.
Awesome. All right. Rob, thank you so much for joining us on this week's episode. It's been a real fucking blast, man.
Yeah, it's been my pleasure. I always have fun doing things, and you guys are great hosts.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
And we're back. God damn it, Daniel. That was.
I mean, we thought that Gygax was the one on cocaine. This guy's on like a whole other kind of drug that I don't even know what it's called.
I think it's just called like
rage,
creativity, and rage.
Yes,
Yeah, absolutely.
He's he's my spirit animal. I swear to God, I love this man.
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, and not only, like, you can obviously tell the amount of like love and drive that he has surrounding everything that he has.
Like, he's seen some shit. He's basically seen enough shit, and he's dealt with enough shit that he's like, I don't give a fuck anymore. I'm just gonna tell it exactly like it is, you know?
And not only that, but he shares a lot of the same viewpoints that I do. He's like, I don't fucking care about your third iteration on an elf. I don't fucking care about your theocracy. Like, let's do something different and new. And like, fuck yeah, man. That's the type of like badass attitude that I want to have in my own life. You know?
I mean, I think that explains like how he can produce so much material. Like, as cynical as he seems to be, like, I think he has so much passion. That's why he can just keep pumping stuff out, you know?
Exactly right. Absolutely. Oh, all right. I'm kind of left speechless after that. Like, honestly, I'm spent, you know, like,
I think we have to thank the Patreons.
Oh yeah. Thank you so much, patrons, for adding in some really cool questions. And beyond that, I feel like that's just going to be our episode. And remember that if you have a world building prompt that you'd like us to work with, you can always send us an email at worldbuildwithus@gmail.com, or you can go ahead and send us a tweet over at Let's Worldbuild. And if you want to have your prompt read early, and if you want VIP access to us, you can always donate to us on Patreon, or you can just come chat with us on our Discord. Any of those things are pretty cool. Remember that we love you very much, and we're going to get through this together.